Adams, I know, is thinking about his legacy, but it's also he didn't campaign on I'm a progressive, so people were like, oh, he's changing his mind. He's like, I'm on the ideological spectrum that I'm on. Like,
Yeah, he was
and
a
I
Republican
slide.
at one point in his
Of
career.
course. And here's the thing, and I remind people all the time, it's like the ideological diversity in the Black community is vast. It's just there's party capture. So 90% of us are in the Democratic Party, but when you start talking about politics and policy and issues, we're all over the place.
Welcome back to Firewall. I'm your host, Bradley Tusk. My guest today is Christina Greer. She's a lot of things. She's a professor of political science at Fordham. She's the host of two podcasts, FAQ New York, of which we're a proud supporter, and In the Thick. She has been a member of the Gotham Book Prize jury from day one. She just wrote a book called How to Build Democracy from Fannie Lou Hamer and Barbara Jordan to Stacey Abrams, which we're going to talk about. And she's a really good friend of mine, and we talk all the time. So lots of different things.
All the things.
Yes, and we have, so the plan is, I want to start with the book because it's a great book and I want listeners to know about it. And then there's so much happening in New York and national politics that I want to kind of delve into that. So, all right, but let's start with the book. So you picked three women who are all like unquestionably impressive, worthy, but I imagine on your initial list there were probably 30 that all could have worked, right? So how'd you land on these three?
So my first book, Black Ethnics, I talked about Black Americans, Caribbeans, and Africans. And a lot of the conversations that came up obviously were about like Barack Obama and Colin Powell and Shirley Chisholm, all obviously key important figures in our collective imagination as Americans, but obviously to Black America. But Barack Obama's, Kenyan, and Colin Powell's Jamaican, and Shirley Chisholm's Guyanese. And so I was thinking about sort of Black women as the keepers of democracy in the Democratic Party and Black women in the U.S. South. And so, obviously Stacey Abrams came very close in 2018 to becoming the first Black woman governor that, we've ever seen in this country. We've never had a Black female governor before.
It's kind of remarkable.
It is. And we're, this past election cycle, we got numbers 3 and 4 as far as Black female senators. Right. Before then, it was Carol Moseley Braun in 92 and Kamala Harris in 2016. Right. So I was thinking about the role of like Black American women who have been doing this work for generations. And I have a lot of love and respect for Stacey Abrams and the campaign that she ran and the work that she's done across public sector, private sector, and government sector. And I was like, who are her kind of parents, if you will, or like political parents? And I was thinking, well, she's not just like a Barbara Jordan, who was a great orator and a great legislator and worked across the aisle, which Stacey did when she was minority leader in Georgia, but she also does outsider-type politics as far as organizing people. And I was like, well, that's Fannie Lou Hamer. So essentially, if Fannie Lou Hamer and Barbara Jordan had a baby, 50 years later, it would be Stacey Abrams. And that's how I landed on this combination of the three of them.
Was it weird that, so you have three people, one of whom you're friends with, I met her through you, and then two who, like, we all know their names, but did you know either of them?
No,
right?
I mean,
so is it, when you were kind of doing it, like the fact that you knew one so well, and then two were just from history, like, how did that impact the writing of the book?
So it's a mini book. And so Cambridge University Press, which is an academic press, has this new marketing idea, which is let's have shorter books that professors can actually put on the syllabus and you can read the whole book, as opposed to having kids pay $40 and you just choose a chapter or two out of the book. Right. And when I create a syllabus, I really try and think about how much I'm asking students to pay. Just for my class, because for some classes, I mean, you've got a daughter in college. Each class can be $250.
My kids, I give them, at least for my book, I just give it to them for free because I'm embarrassed to ask them to spend money on my book.
Right. So, but as my colleagues put this book on the syllabus, it's a shorter book. So I knew it's kind of like writing op-eds, as you know, right? You got to get in and get out. And what I was finding was that so many people had no idea who Barbara Jordan was, actually, and so many people had no idea who Fannie Lou Hamer was. And so Barbara Jordan is the second Black female member of Congress, Shirley Chisholm being the first, and then in 1968, and then in 1972, there's Barbara Jordan from the great state of Texas. And so she was sort of being erased from the history books in some ways, or especially in education, as it gets harder and harder to talk about Black history, which is American history. So the fact that white Americans, Black Americans, everyone have never heard of these icons to help push forward our democracy, to me was like, as my grandmother would say, like a sin and a shame. And then all of my students have to have a favorite president. My favorite president's LBJ for Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act, Immigration Act.
And
he
just
was
a insanely fascinating human being.
fascinating and a
Complicated and
fantastic politician.
You
And
think the last Carol book will ever come out?
I think so.
I hope so.
Yeah.
It feels like it's a real race against
Yeah,
time.
it's like we're literally running against time.
Yeah.
But he was a great mentor to Barbara Jordan.
Yeah.
However, he was a major antagonist to Fannie Lou Hamer. When she's testifying before Congress, he comes up with just a BS
So why was
press
that?
conference. So he did not like Fannie Lou Hamer for a whole host of her outside activism, and also she didn't subscribe to like the politics of respectability. Former sharecropper or sharecropper, and so. To help my students understand also the complexities of how you can like one person and they can be fantastic on an issue that you agree with, but also pretty terrible on certain issues that you may or may not agree with. And so just to help them also understand the nuances
and that's
of
one
a
of the
man.
real, I think, failings of society, or maybe as educators, all of us, in that there's now this worldview that like everything is all or nothing, right?
Yes.
And either you have to agree with everyone 100% and you're good, and if you don't, you're evil. When any human being, if anyone said to me, I agree with you 100% of stuff, then I'm like, well, then you're not thinking. You're not using your own mind, right?
Right.
But
I mean, when I told you the other day, I was like, I feel like the two of us are like asparagus, right? Either people like us or they don't like us. And
I don't really like asparagus, by the way.
or like, I love asparagus. Or like okra. I think okra is probably a better thing because I
like
love okra, but there's some people who just can't do it. But I definitely think that this dichotomous relationship that we now have with individuals where it's all, and listen, there are some people where it's like, I don't get down with you. There's nothing you can do to change my mind. Right. I'm thinking about someone who lives in DC right now, who occupies a very important space in our political imagination. I don't think I'm going to budge on that. But I did want people to sort of meet these women. I mean, for a large readership, they've never heard of Fannie Lou Hamer. They've never heard of Barbara Jordan. And more people, have never heard of Stacey Abrams as we get farther and farther away from her campaign. So it's a short book that I just wanted to pique people's interest. And there have been a lot of great biographies about Fannie Lou Hamer that have come out in the past few years. Not so much about Barbara Jordan.
Right.
So I'm hoping this might inspire someone who's in graduate school or, an author who's like, we have a lot of information about Shirley Chisholm because she was the first, because she ran for the presidency. We actually don't know much about Barbara Jordan.
And especially because, in Austin, the airport is named for her.
Yes.
And Austin has grown into this like major U.S. hub and city. And so exponentially more people are walking by things every day that say Barbara Jordan, and there's probably this back in the mind, like, well, but what was she, right? Obviously, she's important because they named the airport after her.
Right, but I mean, how many airports do we go to?
Right.
And we have no idea.
I don't know who O'Hare was.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like I looked up Charles de Gaulle because I was like, what is this airport that I'm always going in and out of? But and I refuse to call DCA Reagan. That's just my own personal thing. But more and more airports or institutions are named after individuals that we know nothing about. And Shirley Chisholm is finally getting, I think, the attention and respect that she deserves. But there's so many other women, Black women in particular, who need that sort of introduction to, I think, a new generation of individuals, or for some people who are older, a reminder of the things that she did. I mean, when she's in front of Congress, talking about Richard Nixon, talking about the integrity of American democracy. Some of her speeches are literally in the American top 10 orators of, our entire political imagination. She's on that list, I think twice, actually. I think Mario Cuomo might be on the list, too. So I really just wanted to highlight these women for just a new generation of scholars and people who are interested in American politics.
So if listeners were to take away kind of one thing about each of the three of them, what would you want it to be?
With Fannie Lou Hamer, I think you don't have to have education to be an educator. She was a sharecropper, one of many, but the way that she was able to mobilize individuals without formal education.
What do you think the secret to her success was in doing that?
I think a good organizer is a good listener. I think she fundamentally listened to the issues that people were saying were going on in the South, and she was fearless. I mean, she had a Mississippi appendectomy, which is she was sterilized against her will. She was beaten, to an inch of her life several times when she was imprisoned for trying to register people to vote. This is why I vote all the time, just because of the sacrifices.
She would have liked mobile voting.
She probably would have liked mobile voting. I will agree. But really just being fearless in the face of like, this person has a gun and a billy club and the ability to take my life, and like I believe the cause is so much greater than that. Barbara Jordan, I think, really recognizing that to get things done, you have to understand where your opposition is coming from and figuring out a way to find common ground. And she was brilliant at that, coming from the state of Texas, and working within the CBC, the Congressional Black Caucus, but also recognizing that sometimes I represent Texas and I got to go with the Texans. And so those complex negotiations of identity and the multiple identities we all have.
Do you feel like that's something that all politicians do, or do you think she had a unique ability to juggle that?
I think hers was unique. I mean, keep in mind, we're in the 70s, so there are very few Black women in this space at all. At the time, there are 3. Yvette Brooks, I'm blanking Brookside from, that's not her last name, but it's a hyphenate, Yvette Burke, something hyphen, from California. Shirley Chisholm and Barbara Jordan are there together. Now, keep in mind, all members of Congress make the same amount of money. So everyone in the House makes the same amount. So you have these white Southern men who are looking at them like, I cannot believe I make the same amount as this Black woman. Like, how dare America do this to me? And then with Stacey, I would just say, trying to keep the possibility of American democracy and the American dream alive, and like inspiring a whole new generation of people to want to get into public service and to recognize you can do a lot of different things with your life and keep coming back to various public, private, government ways to still the focal point is organizing people and getting out the vote and working on making this country or your state or your town a better place and figuring out the different ways to do it.
Do you think she runs for office again?
I don't know. 2026 is, I don't know, the state of Georgia. I hear whispers about other people who want to run for governor, possibly Keisha Lance Bottoms, the former mayor, who plays well in the sandbox with other members of the Georgia delegation. It's hard, politics better than I sometimes with these granular races. If you lose the first time by a point, and then you lose the second time by 7 or 8 points, it feels as though the winds of change are in the other
the
direction.
sort of rule of thumb is sort of the third time makes you a gadfly. So when you do the third one, you better really feel good about your chances of winning, or run for a race that you have a good chance of winning. Because once you run 3 times and lose, even if you lost by a point the first time, everyone's like, it's just someone that always runs for office.
Right, exactly. And we have to remember the gender dynamics of that. We have to remember the racial dynamics of that. And we also have to remember the confluence of race and gender, the intersection of the two, where, the last office she held was a long time ago. She's got, obviously, a great support across the country. But I think, in the state of Georgia, you have to make sure people remember all the things you did for them in the state, because she's become such a national and, dare I say, international icon.
Figure. All right. Let's go from the sublime to the absurd. What the fuck's going on in New York City politics right now? What is happening with the mayor?
Well, I had a quote in the Times the other day where they asked me about Black voters and would they feel some kind of way if he was pardoned. I was like, that doesn't necessarily mean Black voters would vote for him, but I don't think anyone begrudges him getting a pardon, because I was like, he's negotiating his way out of mess that white boys have done since perpetuity.
And also,
so it's why not?
Do I think Eric has been a successful mayor? Largely no. I have no desire to see the guy behind bars.
No.
Right? So I don't think he has a shot at all at re-election, but if Trump pardons him and he finishes out the year and that's it, that's fine with me.
Yeah, because as we've talked about before, the city is, it's not the 70s or the 80s. It's like we're not getting, mugged in the streets, knock on wood, right? I mean, the city is relatively afloat. Obviously we still have those neighborhoods that are always going to be calcified with crime, and there's just nothing that any mayor has been able to do to solve that. However, here's where I think that, no one's dead in New York City politics until they're literally 6 feet under, because let's leave Andrew Cuomo out for a second. Everyone who's running right now is to the left of Eric Adams. And we know that the city is not necessarily super blue. And as
Trump got 30% in the general.
And that's Trump. So, I mean, there are a lot of people. Eric Adams hasn't forced rich people to integrate their schools. He hasn't forced them to have, prisons in their neighborhoods or homeless shelters. Yeah. He's not made them do anything that say the things that Bill de Blasio was doing. He hasn't changed the SAT, right? I mean, he hasn't changed anything with the specialized high schools. The new crop of people who are working in the administration seem much more legitimate and effective.
The irony is, so you got rid of all of the kind of corrupt political hacks that he surrounded himself with and kind of ruined himself for. Right. And the people left, both the deputy mayors and a lot of the commissioners, are like really impressive, competent people. Yeah. Like, this is the best they've ever been.
So here we are. Like, now,
right.
The ship is
why I don't want him to resign. Like,
right.
Let's
so
finish out the year.
The ship is actually going in the right direction for the first time in a long time. And I have now managers who are helping do blah, 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 blah. Also, I was like, I think a lot of New Yorkers are like, okay, we've had a black mayor ×2. Like, we're good. Like, I think Eric Adams hurts Zellner in a subconscious way for a lot of voters. And then Zohran Mamdani. Right. I think a lot of New Yorkers are like, okay, we've had a black mayor ×2. Like, we're good. Like, I think Eric Adams hurts Zellner in a subconscious way for a lot of voters. And then Zohran Mamdani.
Right. Who's its own thing. But
it's like, you got like a little bit of a Yang vibe where it's like, it's super exciting, but like when it comes time for people to pull in a circle, like, sure, there are a lot of interesting ideas, but I think between now and June, he's got to get a lot more concrete. It's like, how are you going to pay for any of this? Like, I think a lot of people would love a free bus or a grocery store, whatever it may be, or, housing and landlord criminalities, whatever. But it's like, what is the money looking like? And he's not there yet on explaining that. And I think, and I don't want to sound ageist because I'm a woman of a certain age now, but like Mamdani, Myrie, and Ramos, even though they're great public servants and they're doing a lot for the state of New York and Albany, they are young. They feel young. Yeah. And if we know that the electorate that turns out in a primary tends to be a little bit older, I don't know how many of them are excited about,
and also
these 3 under
for
40.
them, so, no New York City mayor has ever won an election for anything after being mayor, right? Ever.
It's a dead-end job.
Lindsay, Bloomberg, Koch, de Blasio ran for president. I'm sorry, not Koch. Giuliani, ran for president. Koch ran for governor. De Blasio came in 6th, I think, in a congressional primary in his home district. Right? Like, it's a dead end. It's the best job in many ways, but it's a dead end job. So if you're only in your 30s or young 40s, like, there's also kind of no rush.
Right. Exactly. But, we know that fortune favors the bold because everyone saw Obama. And so it's like, he went from state senator to U.S. senator to president in 20 minutes.
Obama was a professor at Chicago when I was there in law school. He was a state senator. I was deputy governor. Trust me, none of these people are Barack Obama. Yeah.
And I was talking to my bestie last night about this, who's also a political scientist. He's a once in a lifetime talent. Not even a once in a generation, like a once in a lifetime. And so I think for Adams' competition thus far, and I'm leaving the rich boys out of it because I can't even remember their names. And it's like, you got money, but you don't have like Bloomberg level money where you're going to make this happen and sort of, make a real splash. So by default, I mean, he's still in it.
Right. Now, this week, there were rumors all over the place, right? Ranging from new charges are coming, he's resigning, he's being pardoned. He had this weird, like, I don't feel well, I won't be available this week. And the amazing thing is, when insiders like you and me are gossiping, the thing that seemed the least likely to us was the thing that he actually said it was, which is, I don't feel well, right? Right. That can't possibly be true.
Right, of course.
It has to be something much bigger than that.
Well, I was talking to, I was on a different podcast yesterday, and I was like, my grandmother used to have this saying, it's like, if you lie, you cheat. If you cheat, you steal. If you steal, you lie. Yeah. So it's, and if you did one, it was like, oh, so you're a thief. And it's like, wait, what? I just told a little white lie. But he and his administration have lied so much. White lies, lying by omission, whatever it is. So when he actually says something, we're like, I don't know. And it's like, and it seems like you surround yourselves with a whole bunch of cheats and thieves. So it's just all part and parcel. Right. You're also, and I do hope that he's fine. I mean, this morning he seems fantastic, right? Like I do want my public servants to be healthy.
I like Eric. He's a human being.
Yeah, and you're a black man of a certain age.
Interesting,
You might be stressed out. Your blood pressure might be through the roof. I don't know. And it's a very difficult job, and you've been in a lot of stress. Like I get that, but at the same time, it's like you have lied by omission so much during these past few years over stuff that you didn't even need to lie about. So, and a friend of mine reminded me, it's like, and if he were really sick, we would not know about it actually. Like he would not announce that he was ill. Right. So we kind of take the illness off the table, relatively speaking. It's like, are you laying low because you're negotiating? Are you laying low because something's coming down the pike?
Right.
You know, you're basically giving us something to think about. But, you know, if you've been working on a pardon, shoot, if I was looking at some prison time, I'd be working on a pardon too.
And the thing that didn't make sense to me would be like, well, he's laying low, he's going to resign because he's getting pardoned. Like, no, if I'm Trump and I'm pardoning him, I want him in power.
Yes.
He owes me. And if I'm
he
Adams,
will do all of my bidding.
Why would he believes he did nothing wrong. And if he gets pardoned, why would he resign?
I absolutely wouldn't resign either.
Doesn't make any sense.
And I mean, knowing at this point, we know who Trump is. At this point, we know who Adams is. So if they have some sort of negotiation, which is, let me make all your troubles go away. So you can have a clear head to do all the things that I need to do. I'm tired of this sanctuary city nonsense. I want ICE to roll up to schools and churches. I need you to co-sign this as a Democrat. I need X, Y, and Z because I have just made all of your legal woes go away. And you have plenty of time to focus on what I need you to do as the mayor of the largest city in this country. Yeah. And obviously other cities will follow suit.
Do you know what would be ironic? And I guess this is why Trump would drop the charges and not give him a pardon. But it would be the most Trumpian thing if Adams got a pardon and then just turned around and said, fuck you. And then that's what Trump would do.
That's what Trump would totally do.
If you just drop the charges, you're not quite safe. If you got a pardon, you would be, Trump's not stupid. So they're not going to give him a pardon.
And he's a hustler. So it's two Queens hustlers talking to figure out what's the best deal for me.
Right.
And both of them are trying to figure out the best deal for themselves.
Yeah.
Adams, I know, is thinking about his legacy, but it's also he didn't campaign on I'm a progressive, so people are like, oh, he's changing his mind. He's like, I'm on the ideological spectrum that I'm on. Like,
he was
and I slide. Of course. And here's the thing, and I remind people all the time, it's like the ideological diversity in the Black community is vast. It's just there's party capture. So 90% of us are in the Democratic Party, but when you start talking about politics and policy and issues, we're all over the place. Yeah. And there's a lot of conservative folks, not just in the Deep South, but also in Brooklyn and Queens and Staten Island and the northern part where there are a ton of Black folks. But by and large, we're just in one party together. Right. So it can complicate things. But this is why Eric Adams makes sense to me as a Black Democrat.
It's also why white progressives, I think, so often, they assume that if they think something and it's virtuous in their mind, well, of course, Black people must agree because I'm trying to protect them. And it's like, no, do you ever fucking talk to a Black person? Or do you ever like, and by the way, like you said, and by the way, not just ideologically, even ethnically, I remember when I was running Bloomberg's campaign, the way I saw it was we have African Americans and we have Caribbean Americans, and they're different groups of voters. And we have a different strategy for each of them because you just like Latinos aren't Latinos, right? There's all kinds. Like Dominican and Puerto Rican voters, in my experience, who've been here for generations, were exceptionally different than like someone who just came here from Honduras.
Absolutely. And also, don't forget, Puerto Ricans are Americans. Right. I know we have to constantly remind Donald Trump that, but it's like they don't actually always have the same thoughts on immigration as other Latinos
By the way,
either.
Along those lines, so the reason why I'd be fine with Puerto Rico being a state. Republicans don't want it because they assume that the two senators will be Democrats. If Canada became a country, wouldn't that add like a whole bunch more Democrats to the House and Senate?
If Canada became...
I'm sorry, if they became part of the U.S.
Oh, well, first, I mean, like...
but is it, like, I don't get how it's good for him.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But he doesn't think that way because he knows that this is just performance. I mean, this is my issue with, MSNBC that I used to do a lot of MSNBC, and this time around, I'm like, there's a difference between stories that we need to discuss and things that absolutely aren't going to happen. It's just the performance. And you all want to talk about it like it's news. Right. And this is what we did for 4 years, and we all like spun ourselves into butter. And it's exhausting. Yeah. And I think it takes years off of our lives. And like that's the whole point.
And also you fall for it, right? Which is like they know that they can't issue an executive order any birthright citizenship. Right. But they also know that if they exhaust us with that, then other stuff that might otherwise be fought against hard just sort of slips through. I don't think they ever expected Matt Gaetz to be the attorney general. But Hegseth probably wouldn't have gotten through if Gaetz were never nominated in the first place. So he would have been the worst one.
Absolutely. And so we sort of lower our senses, we lower our ire because we spent 2 weeks on Matt Gaetz, and then Hegseth is like a tiny bit step beneath Gaetz as far as like being deplorable. Right. But it's like, but he's not Matt Gaetz. So here we are, and this fool is, in with the deciding vote with VP Vance.
Right. So then let's pivot to Washington since I guess we're already there. So how are you thinking about this in the terms of? Tell me if this sort of setup is wrong. Trump's back. They're a lot smarter than they were from last time. They have their shit together a lot more. And the institutions of democracy that were able to hold up against him last time, whether it's the Justice Department or the IRS or the Fed or Congress, are a lot more vulnerable to him now. At the same time, if Democrats just repeat their behavior from the first term, that's a losing strategy because you're just yelling and screaming and talking to each other and nothing ever actually happens. So knowing all of that, if the Democratic leadership came down and said, Christina, what do we do? What would you tell them?
Right. So I believe in that framing that you just laid out 100%. Okay. I agree with that. I think that they're much smarter, and I think that the Republicans who actually did care about this nation and served as stopgaps, they are nowhere near this administration. They have been pushed out. During the election season, they're like, this man's dangerous. I saw it up close. And he's not even bothering to work with Republicans. He just has the sycophants in. If the Democrats came to me and it's like, ¿Qué pasa? I'm like, first of all, let's get the DNC together because that can't be a patronage politics job. Right. You gave it to Jamie Harrison because it's like, thanks for running for office that you were never going to win. Here's a really cushy job. That's not a cushy job. It's a really important job to actually set a pace because during Obama years, when we lost 1,200 seats across the country and nobody seemed to think that was a major issue because Obama cares about Obama and he's really great at the politics of Obama and he's not a maniac, so I appreciate that. But all these lower level offices in the state houses that we lost now are slowly but surely, we're thinking about, let's rebuild them. We have to get the DNC in place. This is where I'm sort of like, I love how we didn't mention Michael Blake when we were talking about mayors because it's like Michael Blake. I didn't because it's like you're running for mayor and DNC simultaneously. Like, come on, just don't insult me. So that would be number one.
And is there of the people whose names have been mentioned, is there one that you think would be the best option to run the DNC?
I'm looking at the Midwestern guys. I'm having a senior moment right now, but from Minnesota and also Wisconsin. Right. I do think that there's something about the Midwest when it comes to a vision, sort of like the way I think about basketball. Like they're sort of in the center and can look left and right. And I like sort of Minnesota has an interesting, super progressive politics, but we know that is a faction and a pocket. Yep. And Wisconsin is incredibly diverse. When you have Madison, Milwaukee, but you also have very rural and very red parts of the state where a lot of Wisconsinites have had to learn how to negotiate. I mean, every state is a red state, sure, but Wisconsin to me, having spent some time there, it looks very interesting. Yeah. And it has urban communities and it has rural and suburbs and the whole line. So I would say get that in place. I have said this, and I said this during the first term of Trump, and I'm saying it again. I don't think Chuck Schumer's built for this moment. I think it's time to pass the baton. Nice guy, appreciate your service, but you're not it. And I think that we need to find another Democratic senator.
Who would be on your short list?
I don't know. That is honestly, that's something that I've still been thinking about, but it's not him. And I think that he keeps coming to the fight with old tools and he's making these speeches I can't believe Donald Trump has said this. And I was like, really, Chuck? I can. So, I need you to stop clutching pearls.
The Senate floor speeches is still a very powerful vehicle.
Exactly. And I'm like, what do you do? What are you doing? Actually, what is your mobilization strategy? And so I think he represents kind of an old way of thinking about the Senate when he and Biden could go across the aisle and talk to individuals, and then we can disagree, and then we'll have a bourbon, on K Street later. And it's we don't do that anymore.
When you mentioned Barbara Jordan, you made the point of saying she was, black, and she was a Democrat, and she was progressive, but she was also a Texan, and she balanced those things. You are black and progressive and a Democrat, but you're also a New Yorker who's a fierce advocate for New York.
Yeah.
I'm willing to lose.
I would say a pragmatic progressive.
The Senate majority leader being from New York City.
Yes.
Do you think he has been especially helpful to New York?
To, I think, Wall Street, sure. I'm sure he knows Wall Street and has helped prop it up at times when we've needed someone to do that. I don't think he's the only person who knows how to do that. I'm fine with having a Senate majority leader who's not from New York.
Okay. you think Hakeem is delivering for New York?
I'm sure he is, like, for his district. I think the reason why I'm curious about Hakeem and, I'm not like, we need somebody else, is because I love Nancy Pelosi. I love the fact that Nancy Pelosi is from Baltimore, my favorite city. I love the sort of story of the D'Alessandros and, like, knocking on doors and, like, getting, coalitions between blacks and Italians and Irish and Jews, like, in the city of Baltimore. So her dad can become mayor and then her brother becomes mayor. And, I know that she knows how to play, like, street ball. And she has a level of, like, retail politics and grassroots organizing that she learned from this big family trying to get daddy elected and then trying to get Tommy, her brother, elected. So knowing that she has taken Hakeem under her wing and shown him how to negotiate, at times where it's like, hey, you might lose your job if you vote this way. Tough luck, right? I mean, Tom Perriello is a friend of mine who was a member of the House from Virginia. He came in on the Obama wave in a very purple district, and he voted for Obamacare. And his district was very clear: if you vote this way, we will vote you out of office. And that is exactly what happened. And Nancy was like, tough luck, kid. Like, we appreciate you and we'll help you land on your feet. But, like, you are voting the way we need you to vote. So I think, Hakeem is dealing with the various factions within the party pretty well thus far. As a minority leader, we know that obviously as a minority leader, you don't have a ton of power the same way a majority leader has. But I think my biggest thing is, like, Chuck, it's time to go.
Any third piece of advice for the Democrats? So it's better DNC, get rid of Schumer.
Get rid of Schumer.
Things have to come in threes.
Yeah, of course, things got to come in threes. Stop thinking that this is 2017. We have to figure out, like, what is the strategy for the midterms? I keep hearing conversations like, who's going to be the nominee for 2028? It's like, no. How are we going to get back and get a message across in 2026 that actually resonates? Because eggs haven't gone down. All of a sudden, nobody cares about eggs, right? Before, that was the biggest thing. It's not about wokeism and identity politics. It's about sort of an articulating of a vision that clearly is a misstep, or it's not being translated well, or whatever it is. There was depressed turnout. We know that there's going to be even lower turnout in a midterm, as always. But how do you inspire people to actually get to the polls? If we know that the Voting Rights Act is being eroded, so in a lot of communities it's going to be harder to vote, and we know that Donald Trump is going to make it even harder this second time around.
We should bring the polls to them.
Mobile voting. Vote with your phone by Bradley Tusk. So that is, I think we have to have some creative conversations. Sure, I'm still on the fence on the mobile voting.
I feel like I've been slowly but surely.
You're slowly but surely. You're wearing me down. You're wearing me down.
Yeah, I see it.
But we do know that with the erosion of the Voting Rights Act and with Donald Trump recognizing that, like, the only way he's going to be successful is to, like, keep certain people away from the polls, then how do we have a robust message as Democrats to actually inspire people to want to come out to the polls?
Got it. All right, last topic. So this morning, which is when we're recording, not when this is airing, we announced the finalists for the Gotham Book Prize. And it's the fifth time we've done this now. And Corey is in here, did a great job. The AP covered it. That's a major national publication. And you were one of the first people we called. You said yes immediately. You, me, and Howard have been working together on this ever since. So just out of curiosity, when you first got the call, what you were thinking, where we are 5 years later, what are your thoughts?
First of all, I love being on the ground floor with this whole endeavor. So Howard called me and said, hey, so my friend Bradley Tusk, who I knew of you, right? So
I thought I was like an evil guy.
Well, no, I used to call you Bruce Wayne and Lex Luthor. I'm like, he does these amazing things and the things I disagree with. Again, going back to our dichotomous conversation, right? But Howard says, there's no book prize for someone who writes about New York. So I was like, well, I'm not a literature person, right? I care about politics. And he's like, yeah, but you care about New York. Right. And this is fiction, nonfiction, poetry. And I was like, well, wait a minute. I love reading fiction because it helps me write. Yeah. I write nonfiction, but just hearing language roll around. Yeah. And then you all have assembled this, I would argue, amazing group of novelists and, the head of the Queens Public Library and academics and those of us who write about New York City or work on New York City.
It's a fun group. Everybody really likes each other.
It's a really fun, smart group. Yeah. of really talented writers as well. I think almost all of us have written,
Mitchell wrote a book.
I don't know.
I feel like he's,
Yeah.
I mean, we all agree Mitchell's sort of a genius, but did you know Mitchell's a Republican?
No?
Me either. There were a couple months ago, there was some newspaper article and identified him that, and I called Howard. I said, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah." He's like, I heard it, but
I mean, listen, we're a diverse group. Howard's a huge Yankees fan, and I don't believe in that.
Right.
So, when we first came together, though, you remember our first meeting? It was during COVID, so we were on Zoom.
We didn't even have the bookstore yet.
Yeah, so we were on Zoom,
Yep.
having this great debate about these various books that we were able to read, and I think in an era where a lot of people are, thinking about attention spans. I know Chris Hayes has a new book coming out about like social media and all this other stuff. This is even before this amazing bookstore came to be, but it was just a way to like help me, sit down and read and appreciate fiction. Some of these books I would not have read on my own. They would have come across my desk necessarily. But we've had some, I think, really fascinating conversations about what are we trying to say with this prize? Like, are we trying to highlight lesser-known authors? Like when we gave it to Sadiq Fofana, who is a public school teacher who wrote this brilliant book of short stories about Harlem. Or are we trying to highlight, a fantastic book? You can't lie. Colson Whitehead knows how to write. Yes. So we're giving him the prize. I mean, I don't know his pockets, but, does he need
They seem deeper than Sadiq's.
Right.
Yes.
Does he need this I would argue, very generous
Yeah, same with James McBride a little bit. Maybe he's a little less rich than Whitehead, but same thing.
Right.
If you win a National Book Award twice, you're probably paying the rent.
But I love the fact that even, now that we're in person to debate and deliberate, but then when we announced it last year at the Queens Public Library Gala, I thought that for me at least was full circle. It was super special, not just to see you and Howard getting your golden library cards, which I'm like super jealous about. One day, you always like you like give yourself little goals in life, and I'm like, if I could get myself a golden library card, like I know I've made it in New York City.
There you go. An apartment where the elevator opens up into your apartment, and a golden library card.
Those are the two things. I'm still working on my washer dryer. I get some construction starting soon. So being together in this ragtag group of like brilliant New Yorkers, all of us care deeply about the city. And then I think in our last meeting, either you or Howard, I can't remember which one of you sort of laid out the framework just to kind of get us in the mindset before we started deliberating. But it's like, it's brilliant, Bradley. But thinking about like the movies and the music and the art and the literature that makes New York this magical place that like millions upon millions of people still come to every year, even when we've had ups and downs.
Billions are aware of.
Yes.
Right? It's got to be the city that the most people in the world know about or of.
We're the Michael Jackson of cities.
Yes.
I mean, I think about, my dear friends from Lisbon who I go see a lot. I'm a big Lisbon fan. But when I first met them in Vietnam in 2010, they'd been all over the world, but they'd never been to New York. And it's like, why? And they were just like, well, we've built it up in our minds as this place. So it's like, but you've been to like Thailand and, like all over Europe and, whatever, South America. And they're like, I know, but like to go to New York, and they were artistic designers. They were like, to go to New York is essentially like a mecca for a lot of people, especially depending on what industry you're in, whether you're a musician or artist or whatever. And so we were like, well, we live in New York. Like it's a place that like anybody can come to. Like you can totally come. And they came 2 years later and they stayed with us and, sort of triggered a whole series of now we see each other all the time.
Always in Lisbon,
And they come to New York too. And it's like, it's a small town. Like I tell my students all the time, like keep your nose clean. It's the tiniest town you'll ever live in. There are lots of little neighborhoods. I always end up being like the mayor of my little neighborhood.
It's simultaneously really big and really small.
Yes, it's a little
and
village.
Somehow it's both at the same time.
Both at the same time. It's sometimes dealing with politics and like feels like high school, But I say all that because this prize, this very generous prize, I might add, gives so many people an introduction to books that are written about New York. And we see each year, I mean, that's the criteria. It has to sort of have something to do with New York. People are still writing about New York in fiction and nonfiction ways, and poetry, don't forget. And I just, it keeps the magic alive. And I mean, I'm on the board of the Tenement Museum down the street.
Yep.
We talk about this.
You're the queen of Orchard Street.
Right. Exactly. The Queen of Orchard Street. This is going to be the name of my chapter of my memoir.
That's right. There we go. And on your tombstone.
Yes.
The Queen of Orchard
The
Street.
Queen of Orchard Street. I need to spend a little more time down here, though.
The book is How to Build Democracy from Fannie Lou Hamer and Barbara Jordan to Stacey Abrams. So check out the book. It's great. Of all the various ways people can follow you, pick one or two.
I'm on Instagram. I'm not on Twitter that much anymore. So I'm on Instagram
Right.
mainly, and it's Dr_CM Greer. I made it before I understood how the internet worked. But yeah, that's basically where I am.
Okay.
And I tweet about birds and
Right.
miscellaneous.
Yeah, we didn't get to ornithology. All right. Christina Greer, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Bradley Tusk.
Cool. Firewall is recorded in my bookstore, P&T Knitwear, located at 180 Orchard Street on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. We'd love to hear from you with questions, feedbacks, or idea for a guest. Just email me at bradley@firewall.media or find me on LinkedIn. And to keep up with what's on my mind and my latest writing, please follow my new Substack at bradleytusk.substack.com. Thanks again for listening.